Next, CityNet 30 takes you downtown for the weekly luncheon meeting of the City Club of Portland. Live weekly coverage of City Club is made possible in part by TCI and is produced through the facilities of Portland Cable Access. Now we join the City Club for this week's program.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Club of Portland. I'm Pete Heuser, your president. Today we're going to hear about the state of our schools with Superintendent of Portland Public Schools, Ben Canada. Now, broadcast of our programs this quarter is made possible due to generous corporate contributions of Providence Health Systems, Portland General Electric, and Wells Fargo Bank. We continue to be very grateful for their support. On Thursday of next week, January 21st, the City Club is going to have an open house and a reception. That's going to be from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the club office. So please RSVP to Winnie Kane at the office if you can attend. Next Friday, January 22nd, we'll hear Mayor Vera Katz in her State of the City presentation. That will be here at the Multnomah Club. Now, I'm happy to say that we've completed our annual fund drive and we've reached the $80,000 goal. We actually expect some additional corporate support, and we anticipate that the level will come up to last year's $87,000 record level. Now, I want to personally thank President-elect Lloyd Anderson, who headed the campaign, and I want to thank all other City Club members who participated in it. I particularly want to thank the many members who gave generously. We didn't make my personal goal of 100% participation, but individual giving this year is up 20% from last year. And that's on top of all the research work and committee work that you do. I want to let you know that I really appreciate that, and I think the community does too. So thanks a lot for working and doing well on the annual fund drive. Now, as I told you last week, the City Club's annual membership campaign is underway now. For all recruiters who bring in a new member, you get a free lunch here on Friday. So if you have a friend who's interested in the club, now is the time to do it. And I won't tell them that you got a free lunch if you don't, so you can use it yourself if that's what you want to do. Our board host today is Susan Descamp. Susan is assistant to City Commissioner Charlie Hales, and she'll ask the first question of Ben Canada. After Susan's questions, we'll take questions from City Club members in the audience. And please line up at the mic when Susan is asking her questions so we don't have any delay. I expect that we'll have many good questions of our speaker. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Ben Canada for the first time to the City Club of Portland. Back in July, when we invited Dr. Canada to speak to us, we wanted him to get a chance to get settled into his new job, so we set the date as today, 6 months off. But he's certainly done more than get settled in. He conducted a major performance audit so that he could see what needed to be done in our schools. He's established an audit implementation steering committee to work on areas which were identified in the audit that need work. He's publicly listed the lowest performing schools and has organized a support team for providing those schools with on-site support. Most everyone is pleased with what they've seen so far. We've even seen an instance of a 31-year-old student returning back to high school, evidently because he heard so many good things about what Dr. Canada had been doing. But he certainly will have his challenges. He takes charge of a school district which is subject to statewide minimum performance standards, but what some will say is inadequate funding to meet those standards. But of course, no one will want to hear that the students didn't make the grade because of inadequate money. Now, in an op-ed piece in the Oregonian, Dr. Canada wrote that he had never seen such overwhelming commitment to and interest in public education as this community gives its schools. Now, that's the kind of spirit we need. We will support you, and if you see things we can do to help you, let us know. I attended a town hall meeting last night at the district's office, and you got an earful, but it's great that you're listening. Now, we know that schools cannot survive without our support, but we also know how important your leadership is to achieving district-wide success. Now, that leadership may be establishing school curricula. It may also, though, be arguing in the legislature for more funding or speaking at Pioneers Courthouse Square in support of a ballot measure. That comes with the job. Ben Canada is well prepared to provide the leadership we need. Growing up in the segregated South was not easy. He found that little was expected of most kids, but for those who knew Ben Canada, they expected great things. He graduated from Southern University and was excited about being able to land his first teaching job right out of school. But in a move based on principle that would become his trademark, he resigned his first teaching job because he learned that there were two pay scales, one for black teachers and one for white teachers. Now, after teaching in other schools for a number of years, Dr. Canada obtained his PhD from the University of Texas and moved into school administration. He rose to one of the top education jobs in the South, the head of Atlanta's public schools. We're certainly very fortunate to have Dr. Ben Canada here, and we're fortunate to have been able to lure him to Portland. So let's give a warm City Club welcome to Ben Canada.
Thank you, Peter, for the introduction and for not going on and on and on, and for reminding me of the grad student who seems to get a lot of attention in the paper. I'm truly delighted to have this opportunity to stand before you and to give you the state of Portland Public Schools in terms of the Portland Public Schools annual address. This is an honor that I would welcome each and every year, particularly at this time of the year, if given the opportunity. I can tell you that your Portland Public Schools are performing at a better level than any other urban district that I know of with similar demographics. You can be proud not only of the performance of the students, but for the committed and dedicated staff in all parts of this system. Employees who put children first. It has been said that leadership is not a right, but that in fact, it is a responsibility. The 7 members of the school board, 5 of whom are here, have accepted that responsibility. And in my opinion, they truly ought to be recognized for their leadership. And so please join with me in a round of applause, and I would ask them to stand so that we could recognize them, not only for their vision and support, but for their leadership. So please join with me. Board members, if you would stand. Thank you. Thank you. On August 1st, this past year, 1998, I began my tenure as superintendent of Portland Public Schools. After accepting the position, I indicated that my first 100 or so days would be spent listening, observing, and formulating what I would call a plan for the continued academic growth and success for all children. Not some children, but for all children. In a speech on September 23rd this past year before the Portland Chamber of Commerce, I gave observations of my first 50 days on the job. And during that speech, I acknowledged that there were 5 areas that needed to be concentrated on. Accountability, there's no question about that. Communications, and terrible communications. I acknowledged, for example, that we had difficulty just getting a message out, partially because of all of the cuts, and not only in the communications office, but in other areas. That higher academic standards and expectations for both students and staff were issues. And finally, the issue of safety. It was on a lot of people's mind, and while our schools were safer than anybody gave credit for, the fact that that was a concern, we had to acknowledge it. I can tell you that since then, significant progress has been made with regard to addressing each of those areas. Some areas have experienced greater success than others. None, however, has suffered from a lack of effort to get input from all parts of this community. I reviewed my calendar and today is my 168th day on the job. And during that time, to my amazement, and I knew I was out, and the 168 days doesn't, I didn't acknowledge there were about 6 days that I was not actually in Portland. I was in Atlanta on a weekend with my wife, and I had a special meeting in the Washington, D.C. with the Secretary of Education. But if you discount those, during that time period, I've had over 700 meetings with students, staff, community groups, employees, and that doesn't include all of the other sessions where, you go to Fred Meyer and somebody says, I just want to talk to you, I need just 1 minute, or you're at church and, somebody has to talk with you. But what I'm sharing with you is that I have truly tried to get out and do what I said, and that was to listen, to observe, and then come back and create a plan. And I can honestly tell you that my days are full. In fact, probably too full. Most weekdays consist of about 16 hours in the office, and then several hours at home in the evening because you still have to do the email. You got to read, hopefully, the letter from the wife because she's not here yet. And she's very good about that. She sends me lots of little cards with little things on it. Hopefully she'll be here. We'll sell the house in Atlanta and we'll find a house we can afford. We found several we like. Can't afford them. Okay. But eventually that'll work itself out too. And then on the weekend, it generally averages about 8 hours a day. And again, you've got all of the reading and the work. And without her, I've got to wash and clean and do some other things that I hadn't had the opportunity to learn to appreciate as much as I appreciate now. But here's what you've told me as I've been out there listening. No question about this. We all want the same thing: quality education for all of our children. You've also told me that both students, the public at large, and the staff have become very frustrated and confused about budget figures that change. And as a result of that, people don't know what to believe anymore. They don't have confidence in us in many instances, and they're not sure we're really doing all that we can or should do to make sure that we're delivering education efficiently. Some people believe that too much money is being spent on administration and that not enough is being put into things that really count. Things like lower class size, more textbooks, supplies, equipment, etc. Other things that you've told me is that there's a strong desire to add programs back that have been cut. Having higher level math and science and more speech and debate and languages and art and things of that nature, foreign languages. There's no question that you're saying that you want that back. You've also said that both the city, county, legislators, etc., want to see this district take decisive action and implement changes that allow all of them to make sure that all that can be done to deliver quality education is, in fact, being done. Some of our employees have shared with us a feeling of not being valued. Parents have shared with us a feeling of not having their input being valued. Almost everybody in the city recognizes that class sizes are too large. Some people honestly believe that after 5 years of continuous cuts, that we no longer can be at the top, and that if we don't do something fairly quickly, that Portland will lose that image, that status across the country of being the place. If you really want to see where urban education is working, take a look at Portland, Oregon. Finally, all of you have encouraged the district to listen not only to its employees, but to its parents, to its partners, and to each other before we make decisions and not after we make decisions. Now, last night was a good example of how people feel about our decision-making process. We really do not have a plan. We have produced a document that clearly outlines what we think a student ought to have access to in order to meet the new requirements. But we don't have a plan. We have goals. The goal is to meet the state requirement. The state requirement has been there for quite some time. And whether we liked it or not, and by the way, we like the higher standards, it is in fact the law of Oregon. And so we will continue to do that. But the document itself was causing people not to believe that we truly wanted input and that we had already decided, and now we were trying to get them to buy in. So it was very easy for me to say, tear it up. What I did not say was that we still don't have the goal of having all of our children meet those standards. How we get there is the issue. I've shared with you what you've told me. Now let me tell you what I've really learned, because what people have told me, what people think, are not necessarily one and the same thing. I've learned, and it's true, my perception on this turned out to be true. And Peter, you'll appreciate this because you talked about it also and you made the commitment, and I appreciate that, and I'm going to take you up on it. But that this community truly is committed to quality education for all children, and that's extraordinary. I don't know of any other place in America that has that level of commitment. And that's good. That's something that I'm welcoming. I'm glad that I've learned it. I've learned that Portland Public Schools has an exceptionally high level of experienced teachers, experienced staff that support teachers, both in buildings and at the central office. And that these teachers and support staff will truly put children first and have put aside the lack of resources and have always said, I'm going to do more to make sure that my children are successful. I'm happy to be able to say that is in fact a true statement. I've learned that the majority of our students exhibit the qualities that most teachers and parents would want to see them exhibit. And when given the opportunity to learn more, and people expect them to learn it, these same students leap at it. They snap it up. They meet the higher standard. But they're like all other students, when not given that higher standard, will just come to that. Some will go higher, but most won't. My two daughters were exceptions. I can't honestly say that. They were like everybody else. They would go to that bar and they would reach it, go over it if we said you had to go over it, unless it was something of particular interest. We have to make sure we offer something of interest to every child. I've learned that our central administrative costs are not in fact high, but they are in fact comparable to other urban districts and other systems of our size. I've found that areas of improvement really can take place, and I've found some, and we're moving on those. The performance audit concluded that some things could change, and we're taking those recommendations and we're moving aggressively on them. I've determined that we need to more closely link our procedures for academic accountability with our resources for improving instruction. I agree with the performance audit that the lines of communications between some departments are not clear and in fact lead to confusion. I've concluded that academic performance in certain areas of the SIM and CAM, particularly as it relates to those requirements, can't be delivered to all students with our current curriculum and current funding. That is a true statement. I'm concerned that we do not have an active, formal leadership academy to develop new administrators and continuously strengthen those administrators in the numbers that we need. And we clearly do not have an acceptable community partnership development plan in which members of our community know exactly where to go to get assistance and how to break down what is perceived or is real, a bureaucracy that is saying, go away. That's a perception. I'm concerned that our central approval or disapproval process is too long, and it is, in fact, bureaucratic in many instances. The process is one that discourages innovation in many ways. I'm pleased, however, to tell you that when given the opportunity, the employees of this district not only come up with a wide variety of opinions about a particular topic, but give you significant options of ways to address that problem when asked. I asked for ideas on how to restructure this organization. I had stacks of recommendations from people, deep, honest recommendations that I'm not sure I would have gotten during my first 50 days on the job. So it helped to get out and to go and do that. And I really appreciate that, and I know our employees are looking at this. Now I'm going to say to them again what I said to them earlier today. Thank you. I appreciate your involvement and your willingness to share and continuing to put children first. Thank you very much for that. And I have to apologize to this community for something that is a fact. Communications is not good. We tried to change that, for example, in the forums that we're conducting right now as we ask the question about standards and how we get there. We sent out something before the holidays, but being frugal, we took the cheapest bulk rate that we could get and had somebody else do the things because they could do it more efficiently in terms of getting it through that meter, et cetera. Well, it didn't get out at the time we thought it was. I think your holiday cards and holiday mail took a much higher priority at the mail, at the post office, than our bulk mail did. So it didn't get out until after we had gotten back, and in fact, some meetings had already taken place. But it's an example of us continuing to learn. We will improve on the communications, and we'll go from there. So those are the things that you've told me. Those are the things that I've learned. Now, the question, what am I going to do about it? Well, I've concluded that business as usual will not lead to the quality of education that we all desire for all children. That the future will require encouraging more innovation, streamlining decision-making, clarifying our focus and organizing around that vision. It's time to create a new Portland Public Schools, one that clearly shows and knows what its goals are for student achievement, one that clearly measures those goals and reports progress toward each of those goals, and aggressively supports and implements innovation and other methods of achieving those goals, and doing this in an environment that shows that we respect and care about our employees and the members of this community. Now, armed with those conditions and the full belief, and I really believe this, that there will be continued support from the business community, from parents, from non-parents, from the employees, from the various employee organizations, and from the students themselves, I propose 6 basic strategies. Number 1, create and maintain a work environment that is committed to excellence and respect for employees. Seek inclusion and promote decision-making and conflict resolution at all levels, primarily and hopefully at the lowest level. 3, expect and deliver better curriculum to all students, allowing them to not only meet those new standards, but to exceed those standards. 4, develop and implement an accountability system that restores public confidence as well as employee confidence in our financial integrity. 5, support innovation from schools, departments, and community partnerships. And finally, number 6, develop relationships with metro districts that allow sharing and pooling of resources. In an arena where the resources are declining, we're going to have to be willing to share with each other and take advantage of strengths from one and a weakness in the other. The initiatives that I want to talk about are as follows. But before I talk about my proposed initiatives, I want to especially thank the 150 plus members of this community who have been involved in the Strategic Steering Committee for the Audit Implementation Steering Committee and the task forces. And I realize that several of them have not finished their work. They still have some recommendations to bring forward. But based on their deliberations and my personal knowledge of certain situations, I want you to know that your deliberations have heavily influenced my thinking, and so therefore I want to share with you some thoughts. One on reorganizing. I believe it was Warren Bennis who said, failing organizations are usually overmanaged and underled. Although this district is definitely not a failing organization, the perception that we are overmanaged is certainly held by a wide range of individuals, both inside and outside of our district. Effective Tuesday, the 19th, next week, I will be implementing a new organizational structure. This organization structure is designed to do several things. Number one, streamline the decision-making process, clearly putting me as the instructional leader and having decisions being able to be made closer to me and access to me. It will eliminate the disconnection between student accountability and curriculum and instruction. It will support communications among job functions because we're aligning functions, job-like functions, and clarifying the leadership roles. It will support staff, community, and student involvement in the decision-making processes. It will support a caring and humane approach while equally ensuring accountability. It calls for the elimination of 2 of the 4 assistant superintendent positions that I have. There are 2 retirements that I will not fill, so we're cutting that top layer in half. I'll eliminate a minimum of 4 district-level director positions, with more to come next year. And I will call for outsourcing management in selected areas. The next area that I want to talk about in terms of the changes that we're about, in terms of initiatives, deals with the areas of facilities and space utilization. Now, since I've been in Portland, there's been a great deal said about facilities. There's been a lot printed, and they range anywhere from close the Blanchard Education Service Center, commonly known as the BESC, to contracting with others to take over part of it, to closing schools, to co-locating functions within systems. And as soon as I get the recommendations from the Facilities Task Force, I will move on some recommendations, but I want you to know what I'm thinking in advance of those recommendations. With regard to the Blanchard Education Service Center, the nice, huge, big, orange building that so many people believe is full of administrators, I want us to determine what the best use of that facility is, not just for the school district, but for the community at large. That means that we have to be prepared and will be prepared to consider relocating all administrative functions from that site to a different site and leasing out the administrative portion of the building or co-leasing it with some other governmental entity. But I'm prepared to consider doing that. I'm convinced, however, that we need to keep the food service and other functions there. Now, I don't know that if you know this, now we did a great job with the meals today. But I can tell you that at the Blanchard Education Service Center, every day, 5 days a week, they prepare 30,000 lunches and 12,000 breakfasts for children in this city. There is no other facility in this area that can accommodate that, And if we did not maintain that, we really would be doing a disservice not only to children, but to the taxpayers of this community and of this state. And I say the state now because the state controls the dollars. So we'd be doing a disservice to all of them. So I'm convinced that we should keep that part of the facility going. I think we ought to consider working with the county to see whether or not that great food service center, and it has gotten actually national recognition for its efficiency of operation, contracting with the county to perhaps provide the meals for the inmates at the jail, that perhaps we ought to contract with the county to provide the Meals on Wheels for senior citizens. We ought to be looking at alternative ways of doing things that allow us to take advantage of the great infrastructure that's already there and the efficiency of management and operation that exists there. I think we need to consider creating a professional development center in one of our closed facilities, or a facility that may wind up being closed, so that we're not spending money going somewhere else, but that we create the center where we can do the training, the retraining of all of the employees in this system in an area that's conducive for educational innovation. Adding a professional library there so that they have access to the materials and research that they need. A place where the planning can go on. These are things that we need. We're spending money and losing efficiency of operation. And if we have a facility that's not being utilized, take the money one year and rather than paying it somewhere else, redo it and have the facility for ourselves. We have a great facility in Green Thumb. I think Green Thumb, however, can have much greater value add. I think that Green Thumb should become a component of Madison High School, and that Madison High School should actually be expanded, and that we ought to look at trying to get Madison to become a school that would be known as an agri-science and agribusiness high school. It's funded and supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It is one of the areas in urban communities that's frequently overlooked, but in our state, like most states, the agriculture community has significant need for which they can't get qualified students, et cetera, who are willing to go into colleges and into the world of work. We could do that, and it would take advantage of the technology. The whole issue of the environment, the river, et cetera, all of that's covered in there. Students who graduate successful from the program are automatically given scholarships to great universities who focus in this area. I think we ought to take advantage of that. The whole horticulture industry here, flowers, et cetera, our students do wonderful jobs with that. I think we need to expand that, and I'm proposing that we immediately begin to explore that. In fact, we have some staff who are working with some people in Washington now, getting facts and figures. Under existing board policy, I propose that we look at the possibility of reconfiguring grades in schools. Right now, most of our elementary schools are K-5. Now, some of you may not know this, but we have K-8. We even have a K-12. Been in existence for about 30 years. So lots of innovation here. That's a part of that myth. But we also know that there are some students who mature at different levels. They learn at different levels. Perhaps we ought to have the opportunity for some students who are not ready for 6th grade to remain in the neighborhood school and have it become, rather than a K-5, it becomes a K-6 or a K-7 or a K-8 or a K-10 or another K-12. I don't know. But I think we ought to have communities getting involved and looking at what's best for them and then working with us, and then we make some decisions and get it out there. There may be a great small elementary school in the neighborhood that couldn't accommodate that, and clearly would have to be based on the ability of the school to accommodate it. But there may be a middle school in the area that has space. Maybe the elementary would want to go into the middle school, and it becomes the K-6 or the K-8, and the neighborhood would then, in fact, not have the elementary school operating as an elementary school. It now becomes the elementary school in the middle school site. All I'm saying is we have to look at options, and we have to take into consideration the needs of our children and not just say because we've made a decision and we're lockstep into that. I think we need to fund and promote the second International Baccalaureate program. Right next door at Lincoln, one of the best international baccalaureate programs you'd find anywhere. I think we need to have the second one. It needs to go to Cleveland, We're having the discussion. We've had the people from IBN. But it can't be based on maybe funding is there. The funding has to be secure. It is expensive to start it, but once it's there, you support it by having students enrolling. And since there are other districts around us that don't have enough, this is where students from another district could pay tuition, get involved in the IB program here. They still belong to that district, but they're getting the best value in terms of education that's available in the metro area by doing some co-district sharing. I think we need to look at and actually implement the middle grades pre-IB program. That calls for a grade configuration of 6 through 10. We have a number of students who have the desire and the innate ability to meet the IB standard and actually go and receive the IB diploma. But they've not had the study skills, the rigor, the requirements that would allow them to be successful in that program. I think we ought to have 2 of them strategically located so that every part of this community has a place where students can go and get the training, the background that would allow them to be successful in moving up to a higher standard. By the same token, we have talented and gifted students. In some schools, the number is significant enough that they can, in fact, because of the size, get enough resources to meet individual students' needs. In other places, there's maybe 1, 2, 3, as few as 10 students there who are having difficulty getting the resources. Maybe we ought to have a place like the pre-IB schools where students could go there and be a part of that and meet their TAG requirements. I don't know. I just know that TAG is an area where we have to look at doing something different. And I would say to the TAG advisory group, I did not say we were doing away with TAG. I simply said we are going to look at some different options for meeting those requirements and making sure that every child has that opportunity. We need to seriously consider consolidating 1 or 2, maybe as many as 3 schools. Underutilized schools create a problem not only for the community, but for the schools themselves. And yes, small is great, but you can become too small to be efficient. But that means that we have to look at some kind of consolidation, and we can't run away from that. I've said that we need to outsource some management positions, but specifically in the physical plant area, and that we really need to reorganize that entire unit to be more asset management oriented rather than just, quote, caretakers of an aging physical plant that so many people think that we are. We are different, we think differently, but we need to aggressively do that, and one of the ways to do that is to outsource some of the management, and we'll be doing that immediately. And in some cases, much longer because we have to go through a whole process. We will also implement what we're calling a just-in-time inventory system. In other words, schools order it, it's delivered directly to them and not to the warehouse and then sent back out. We want to reduce windshield time. And if there is windshield time, driving time, that is charged to the vendor and not to us. With regard to the budget and finances, here's what we're proposing. We're going to continue working to try to get additional revenue. And I have to tell you, I'm really encouraged by what I'm hearing from our legislators. I appreciate all that's being done. And I really hope that more money, in fact, does come. But the fiscal side of me will not allow me to bet the future of our children on a notion that somebody else is going to take care of us. I want the money, we deserve the money, and we'll fight for it. But I'm also saying to our staff, we have to live within the budget that we get, and we will live within that budget. Now that means that if we don't get any additional revenue, we'll have to make an 8% cut. That 8% cut would be devastating to us, but nevertheless, we have to do that. That means that we have to determine what our core functions are. And those that are not core to what we do to make sure that children are meeting the educational needs, that we're meeting the educational needs of our children, we're no longer providing. If the money comes, then we would say we'll go back and add the revenue back to the various areas that were cut, but not just based on the way we cut it. 50% of any add back would have to be for innovation and addressing an area for which we didn't have dollars to start out with to meet that problem. I think we have to create self-sustaining programs that pay for themselves. One area that we will start immediately and as early as Tuesday will the area that I'm calling grants management and partner development. They will only exist after this year if they're able to go out and create grants that generate enough money to pay for them. And what better way to show that you're seeking partners than to have your lifeline, your lifeblood depending on you going out and helping partners break down the bureaucracy and get in and do something different so that the money in fact comes. Other things that we'll be looking at is developing a pilot salary incentive program, and you'll have to excuse me, I've been under the weather, but so far I'm not into a coughing spasm, so something is looking out for me. This initiative, this incentive, would be available to anybody associated with a school where they meet a specific goal in terms of academic improvement, attendance, parental involvement, energy. I don't know, we would have to come up with it, but certain components are there. The academic improvement, the parental involvement, discipline, and things like that. If they in fact meet it, then they would get this incentive. And anybody associated with them from Central that provides support to them would get that incentive. That will cost us, however, about $1 million. I would love to have the opportunity to be able to demonstrate that our employees not only work hard, but they will exceed the standards that we set, and that we are in fact willing to support greater performance and therefore incentivize others to do more and get the reward for it. Dollars are not the only incentive, but it certainly helps in an arena where we don't have enough money to let our employees know that we value them more than we currently are able to show them. I will ask the board to support a resolution indicating charter schools are not evil, that we support charters in the public school arena. And we will do that immediately. We'll ask them to do that. And so we want people to know. Again, innovation is something that we're looking for and we support as long as there's equity of offering and no child is being denied the opportunity to have participation in it. Starting next week, we will also ask all certificated administrators, those who have to have a certificate to perform their function, to serve as a substitute teacher 1 day a month. I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask everybody else to do it. In my 168 days here, I have loved every opportunity to get into schools and see the wonderful things that our teachers are doing. I want our teachers to know that we are, in fact, in touch with what they do every day and that we are not afraid. And by the way, many of the principals and assistant principals do it now anyway because we can't get enough substitutes. So it's not going to be something new. But for some of us at central office, it will be a little new. But that's okay. Many of our principals have worked for years to make sure that all students are meeting the benchmarks at certain grades, and they work with their parents so that they're not promoting them when they don't in fact meet it. Some parents, however, want their children to be moved on even though they've not met the benchmarks. Beginning in the following year, I will ask our board to support a policy that says we will not support social promotion, but that in fact we will come up with different programs to support those children who are having difficulty, including summer school. Our staff have actually gotten together. They've figured out, I think, a wonderful summer school program that we could put in place this summer to help those children who are not making it, not have them have to go through negative perceptions of not being able to keep up and move on, but in fact have them have positive perceptions about themselves because we've given them the extra time and we've met their needs, but we are not going to be supportive of social promotion. Again, we need about $1 million. I'm up to $2 million above what already is there, but I'm asking for help to be able to demonstrate to our legislature and to others that when given the resources, the employees of this district not only can, but will meet the needs of children, not just minimally, but they'll do it exceptionally well. I also think that as we're holding school principals and staffs accountable for what happens in their buildings, that it's difficult to be held accountable when you don't control your staffing. I think that principals and schools ought to have the right to select their staff if they're going to be held accountable. Realizing that this is something that will take a great deal of dialogue and review, I will immediately put together a task force to work with the various entities. I've had great respect and dialogue with members of various organizations. I want to enhance that and continue that, but I want people to know that if we're going to hold the principals accountable, the teachers accountable, that they ought to be able to work together, and as they develop their school improvement plan, they ought to be able to put the team together that they know can achieve that. Many of these initiatives not only will require the work and dialogue between each other as employees with employee organizations, but it also requires the support of the school board. And again, I say to you, I've worked with a number of boards. I've never had the privilege and pleasure of working with the Board of Education that has allowed me to be able to manage a system and support different ideas than this board. And I'm going to ask you to give them a hand again, because that means one hell of a difference. Please give them a hand. In closing, I want to say again, this city, this state, this county can be very proud of Portland Public Schools. We not only will continue to work to have all children meet the goal that the state legislature laid out when it passed the initiatives for SIM, CAM, and then support for PASS, but we want to have all children meet them and then work toward exceeding them. Recognizing that the lack of dollars will hinder that, I also want to go on record as saying this. Again, we will live within our budget, and we will not let the lack of dollars allow us to fail. We will be creative, we will listen to each other, and we will recreate ourselves if necessary in order to keep putting our children first. Parents, you play a critical role. We know that you should be involved in the selection of administrators. You will see a plan that allows you to be involved. You have to acknowledge and recognize that we don't hire any principal as a lifetime person for a school. And so therefore, you don't have the voice, but you have a voice. We will listen to that, but we have to make sure that there's diversity of opinion for selection of administrators that come from all over the city, because we do have to move them all over the city. And when you leave a person in any building too long, you begin to lose innovation. And so we have to make sure that we do that. I met the other morning with a group of PE teachers who had put together a new proposal for a curriculum for physical education for all children. I was very proud of it. And they had a slogan in there that caught my eye. And I want to share it with you, because as we think about this organization, the reorganization of it, and where we're going, I want you to keep these three little thoughts in mind that they had on the cover of their proposal on how we get physical education back in the schools for all children. And it simply said, learn it, do it, embrace it. Your public schools here in Portland are in great condition. And if we all learn to work together, then in fact do that and embrace others doing it, your public schools will continue to be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Canada. That was exciting and interesting. My thoughts recently have been with the loss in Seattle of their wonderful school superintendent, John Stanford, and I spoke briefly with you. I know you're very familiar with his career. He died, I believe it was just this last summer. Is that right? He had galvanized the Seattle community around a really failing public school system, and he challenged and inspired and led parents, non-parents, and the business community. I mean, some say he bullied the business community, but he was really moving in a direction that we desperately need in Portland. We need that leadership. We need that inspiration. I'm hoping maybe you had some thoughts on John Stanford in Seattle, how he did it, how that could be applied here, how your leadership and passion could get out to the business community and bring them on board.
Well, I did know John Stanford. He was the county supervisor, Fulton County, Georgia, which Atlanta is, the first year of my superintendency in Atlanta. And we had dialogue about him applying for the superintendency in Seattle, and I encouraged him to talk to then Mayor Rice, who happened to have been a parent of mine when I was principal of Franklin High School in Seattle, and to Ellen Rowe, who was the senior member of the board, who I think at that time had been on 20-some years. And John did, and he became superintendent. We talked to each other on a number of occasions about what was happening in Seattle. And having been a principal in Seattle, a teacher in Seattle, a brother who just retired as a custodian in Seattle, and having just sold one of my houses, my last house in Seattle, about 6 months before I had thought about coming to Portland. I do know a lot about John, and John was a master at saying what he thought and always putting children first. And what he was willing to do was go to the business community and simply state the case. If Seattle is to continue to grow and be a place where people want to come, Seattle Public Schools had to change. And it's not a big secret. If you're going to be viable, first question that business asks, what's the school system like? Is it a place that I want to bring my children? It's the same question that we all ask. I will tell you that right now, as I go to some services and I meet some of the senior citizens in the stores, they read and they watch television and they know who you are. They'll say, we know you. But they're concerned that right now, many of whom graduated from Portland Public Schools, that their grandchildren are not being given the same level of access to programs that they were able to get when they were students in Portland Public Schools. And that concerns them greatly, and it concerns me. So I would just say, Susan, the issue is being honest, being willing to be innovative, and to do the kind of things that we've outlined. And again, let me say this, because I really want to keep reinforcing it. The ideas that we've generated didn't just come from me. They came from parents, they came from cabinet, they came from secretaries in central office, they came from secretaries at schools that emailed me, some of whom were surprised to get an email that showed that it came from me at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I couldn't sleep, so I emailed them. Okay? Okay, if you go to the, is that correct? Okay.
Don Frisbee, a member of the club. I think everyone in the audience knows of many instances where various organizations of the city have collaborated, worked closely with the Portland school system in efforts aimed directly at what you're talking about. I'm talking about the universities, the colleges, the cultural organizations, the youth organizations, on and on. You haven't mentioned that kind of collaboration. I'd be interested in your views on it. And secondly, how effective you think that kind of collaboration is here in Portland in helping meet the goals you've outlined. And thirdly, what we might do as an organization, the City Club, being one of those agencies, to help that along.
I'm so glad that you came to the mic and asked the question. In preparation for a speech where you're told you have this much time, the question is, what can I put on the agenda and actually deliver? That's a critical component of our initiatives. There are a number of initiatives that we don't talk about now because we didn't have the time to put them out there. But a major piece is the relationship with the colleges and universities in our area. I'm happy to tell you and proud to tell you that we've had great dialogue with all of the presidents and the deans, and that we are proposing and they're proposing initiatives between each other so that we can look at ways to strengthen what's already there and to create anew. And so I support it, and what you can do to support it, if you're a board member or you have relationships with a board member, encourage the colleges and universities to be as creative as we are in getting out of the box and not doing things with, as we call it, Tawadiism. And that's spelled T-T-W-W-A-D-I. Translated, it means, that's the way we always did it. Okay. Yes.
Steve Novick, City Club member. Dr. Canada, having worked with the legislature for the past couple of years, I'm a little concerned that some people might get the message from today, well, Canada says they can handle an 8% cut, no problem. And so I've got a two-part question. One is, could you outline briefly just how devastating an 8% cut might be? And second, could you give us some thoughts, and this is a tough question for someone who's been here for 6 months, but on what measures the state might take to raise some additional money? I know you've talked about a cost of service funding formula model, which I understand, as I understand it, it would take about $300 million new dollars to raise the total pot of money enough to implement that model without cutting other schools. In terms of how the state could raise $300 million, basically the state budget consists of prisons, healthcare, and education. So one option would be to cut back on the health plan. One option would be to repeal Measure 11 and mandatory minimum sentences. In terms of raising more money, basically you've got raising the personal income tax, or there's a proposal to raise the corporate income tax, which is now a flat 6.6%, to a graduated 5%, 7%, 9% level, which coincidentally would raise, I'm told, $293 million. The business community in Portland has been bold enough to support a temporary business income tax here. Right. I'm curious as to whether you'd be willing to ask them to go the extra mile and support that statewide proposal.
I'm prepared to ask any and everyone to go the extra mile. I'm not going to just limit it to the legislators or to the business. But you're absolutely correct in terms of the additional dollars. I believe there's approximately $4.5 billion proposed. That won't solve our problem. Even if it's enacted the way it is in the governor's speech in terms of special needs, and Portland would certainly get a portion of that, we would still have, of the $26 million deficit that's there now, we would need to raise an additional $20 million, and that only keeps us at status quo. It doesn't add anything back. I think the difference in money would have to go up to about $5.2 billion as opposed to $4.5 billion. And I think that there are a number of ways that some reallocation and rethinking. Prisons are growing very fast. The educational programs in the prison would rival any of the best programs that any of us anywhere in the state could put out. And so clearly, I don't think that a student in this state should have to go to prison in order to get the best access to a quality education.
I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll look forward to hearing you next year, but good luck in the next year dealing with the budget. Hopefully we'll be able to give you more, but we appreciate your ability to try to work with what you have. Again, thanks for coming. We're adjourned.